Good morning. My name is Gary Matsuoka, and we're here at Lagoon Hills Nursery in Santa Ana Saturday morning. And we've got class on our favorite topic, which is soils. And generally, we want to explain to our customers, especially our new customers, um, who think our soil is magical, that it's not really magical. It's just that everybody else's soil works so poorly that ours seems magical. So we'll tell you a little about what soil is supposed to do and why ours works a lot better than anyone else's soil. So the problem we've had in the trade, back in the 60s and 70s, it seemed that it was real easy to grow plants. You just dug a hole in the ground, put them in there, watered them. They're fine. We didn't really have much trouble in those days. Everybody was more concerned about roots going in circles around the pot than anything else. In the last 20, 30 years, the main problem has been root rot. Everybody, the plant sits there and it does poorly. The leaves look bad. A lot of them die. And everybody's being blamed for overwatering. Well, that term was invented in the 80s. We had never heard that until the 1980s that you overwater plant. Plants love water. Uh, and then we heard, oh, you need better drainage. Drainage wasn't an issue before the 1980s either. There's something else going on that's really bad for plants, and that's what apparently academia thinks about what real dirt is and how to grow plants, especially when you grow them in containers. So our industry grows things in pots. Um, 50 years ago, now let's go back 60 years, my dad grew everything in soil that looked like this in containers. This was, I played it when I was a kid. I know the texture and everything. This was a soil we grew plants in. In those days, we water every day, fertilize once a month. My dad said, oh, growing this industry is really easy. You follow those rules, water every day, fertilize once a month. Um, Plants grow. You can grow your money just by putting in a pot with the soil. So in the 1980s, things started rotting. We had always grown quite a few of our own plants. In the 80s, we decided, well, maybe our time is better spent buying plants from other growers, and things started rotting. My dad called in the agricultural agents. They told him, you can't water your plants every day. They're going to rot. And he turned to me after a few minutes and said, you figure this out. I've been watering my plants every day for the last 30, 35 years, and now it doesn't work. What's gone on? So first, what we should do is tell you a little bit about what plants need from the soil. And this has changed over the years as we found out more and more. Let's take a nice big tree. Now, 50 years ago when I was in school, they always showed the root system of the tree being the mirror image of the branches on top. Well, now we know it's not that at all. Roots of trees, there's no such thing as a taproot unless they're in a real tall container. Generally, the roots stick real close to the surface and go way far out that way. And so the reasons for that, what the number one thing roots need, of course, it's kind of intuitive, is water. So the ground has to be able to capture the water and store it there for the roots. That's number one. Number two, actually, I shouldn't put these in order because I need all of them. Secondly, they need gas exchange. Roots actually breathe oxygen and give off carbon dioxide just like we do. So especially oxygen. So we all know that the green parts of the plant, well, they contain little things called organelles called chloroplasts, and the chloroplasts in the leaves and the green parts of the plant, they're the ones that take water from the soil, carbon dioxide from the air, and make sugar from the energy of the sun the waste product is oxygen, which the rest of the plant needs to grow or to do its thing. The rest of the plant uses oxygen. The green parts of the plant create oxygen, mainly during sunlight hours. The roots have to breathe oxygen too, but plants, unlike animals, don't have a circulation system that does that. Plants have a circulation system, but it just moves around water and minerals and nutrients. Our circulation system, the main thing it does is get oxygen from our lungs out to the small cells in our body through the blood. But plants don't have that, so the oxygen's got to go out through the leaves into the atmosphere, go through the soil to the roots. And that's why roots can't go down very far, especially in heavy soils, is because they have to breathe. Now, plant roots don't need as much oxygen as we do. So in other words, if you got buried in the ground, you'd probably be dead within 10 minutes. No oxygen. We need a lot more oxygen. Roots of plants can generally hold their breath for about 2 days. Most of them can. So the oxygen is generally not a problem if they're fairly close to the surface. So what they found is that even in a forest, most of the roots of the trees are within 2 foot of the soil. 60% of those are within 1 foot of the surface of the soil. If you're in heavy clay, it can be 8 inches. If you're in a canyon full of gravel, like there are some steep canyons anywhere around the world that are filled with rock, those roots can go down 20 feet. We know a friend of mine who's a geologist says they found roots 200 foot deep in earthquake faults. So when the rocks fractured there, can get down to the roots follow it. If they have water and air, they'll follow that water and air as deep as they can go. But in general, in a city, you won't find roots below 1 foot. 1 foot's about it. Our soil's too compacted in the city. That's why when you see trees blow over the news, there's not much dirt coming up with them. And that's why they blow over so easy, because they're not very deep. So gas exchange is important. Um, Insulation. So roots operate in a I would say narrow range of temperatures. They like to be above 40. They definitely don't want to freeze, and they want to be below 90. So the soil insulates the roots so they don't overheat, uh, and they don't get too cold. Now, the soil doesn't freeze except on high mountains. In the lower 48s, of course, in Alaska, you get that permafrost that freezes. Only a few plants put up with that. And lastly, stability keeps it from falling over. Now we used to put in nutrients, but now we know, the soil for most plants is not a source of nutrition. That's what most potting soil companies get wrong. They think they got to make the soil nutritious, but generally, according to C. Davis, most of the plants that we talk about and grow don't depend on the soil for nutrition at all. That's not the role of the soil. So the soil is their home, just like our homes, our buildings. We don't eat them. We do expect gas exchange and a source of water. So the houses provide that. We don't eat our houses. Plants don't eat the soil. So that's real important. This is prime key. So gas exchange. If you don't have enough oxygen soil, you promote root rot. Has nothing to do with, not much to do with drainage, not much to do with how much you water. So the tap water coming out of the faucet, plenty of oxygen in there. The water district has rules. They know they have to have it's 5 to 7 parts per million of oxygen in their water. Because if they don't do that, you water your ground, the roots can suffocate and die. If you put tap water into a pond with fish and doesn't have the 5 to 7 parts per million of oxygen in the water, you'll kill your fish. So they know the water's got to have adequate oxygen, and usually it does. I mean, rainwater's got plenty of oxygen. the cooler the water is, the more oxygen it can hold. If you boil water, no oxygen in there. But generally, there's plenty of oxygen in the water. So overwatering should not hurt your plants. Should not. I mean, one of the most sensitive plants, especially orchard crops, to supposedly root rot is avocado. Now, I will mention, so the plants on this end of the table are the ones, I put something on the wrong side. So on the right side of this table are plants that we are notable that they can get by with less oxygen in the ground. One of the lowest plants oxygen needs is pear trees. They said 2 parts per million, they'll make it. Grasses, lots of lily plants, roses, daisies, ficus, or fig trees, canna lilies. Actually, canna lilies may be sensitive. However, this plant happens to run sideways through the soil, so it tends to find a better spot. So these plants you can get by with lower oxygen in the ground. These plants need a lot of oxygen because they rot real easy. So when the oxygen levels drop low, you promote root rot. It's not the water, it's when the oxygen levels in the soil, of course it could be the water itself doesn't have enough oxygen. When those drop too low, you get root rot. A lot of the California natives, Lewisia, salvias, mimulus, well, we know these rot super easy if the soil's not right. Gerbera daisies, nasty, and without the oxygen, we lose a lot of flax plants or phormiums to root rot. Same with heucheras. People lose blueberries, ferns, English lavender, really bad. This is probably the most sensitive plant we've ever seen. Then gardenias. So, all this stuff here we're growing in our soil. We know the oxygen's key. So here's avocado. The avocados root rot real easy. However, it's not the water because you can grow them in a glass of water for years. Yep. So it's not drainage. That has no drainage. It's not too much water. It's growing in water. This water happens to have plenty of oxygen in it. As long as it's got access to the atmosphere, and there's nothing inside of it decomposing really fast, it's fine. You throw a handful of ground up dead stuff in their compost, it'll smell like a sewer in about a week, and the plant will be dead. It's like if you put ground up dead stuff in your fish bowl, you'll do the same thing to your fish, maybe in one day. Take all the oxygen out of the water, and there it goes. So it's the oxygen in the soil, in the root zone, that causes that's of concern. It's not really the water itself. The water's got plenty of oxygen. So roots, if this had no access to the air, eventually the roots will use up all the oxygen there, and then it'll be dead. But as long as it has access to the air, you're fine. So that's what plants need. Uh, most potting soils are made out of, and planter mixes on that part, are made out of pure compost. And because of that, they tell you, oh, the more compost you put in the ground, the better your soil, the healthier your soil will be. Well, it'll have more minerals in it and less oxygen. That's what you're doing to your soil. You're lowering the oxygen level and raising the mineral content. Most potting soils, or a lot of potting soils we've seen, are pure compost. Like, how do plants even grow in that? Well, let's talk a little bit about what plants are needing from the soil. How potting soils can provide a lot of that stuff, at least temporarily, whereas we went for permanency with our top pot. So So natural soil that a farmer would want. This is off a friend's farm in Irvine. He said this is the best farmland he's ever leased. And the soil they want is sandy loam. So now loam, which has been, the definition's been messed up. So we hear from, I've read journalists' articles about horticulture saying, make your soil rich and black by adding rich and loamy, rich loam by adding a lot of compost to it. That's not the definition of loam at all. Loam doesn't mean it's got a lot of compost in it. Loam means it's got significant portions of all the sand particles, all three sand particles, sand, silt, and clay. If those three soil particles are there present, you've got loam. If you're missing one of those, you don't have loam. If you just have a lot of sand, you got real sandy soil, or just pure sand. If you have clay and no sand, you got real bad clay. Um, so what is this made out of? So soil generally, most soils around here is granite ground up. So granite is mostly quartz. So if you melt this, you can get glass or pottery. So, the ground hits, if lightning hits this soil, you get glass. Everybody's heard about that. Um, they melt sand, you get glass. So the lighter parts of a piece of granite are quartz. The darker parts are from, if this was brown, it would be from iron combined with the quartz. If it's gray, it's more either magnesium or aluminum or some other metallic minerals combined with the quartz. But still, it's mostly quartz. And the lighter parts become the sand and the silt. The darker pieces in here are called feldspar, the ones that are combined with other minerals, and it becomes the clay. So when this is in the mounds and it starts breaking up, you get something called decomposed granite. And when the riverbed gets done churning it, making it real fine textured, you get sandy loam. So this is just a coarser version of this. Now, sand is heavier, so it usually falls out of the river first. So we have hills back here of sandy clay. Further back, you have hills of decomposed granite. The riverbeds closer to the hills drop the sand out. So along the Santa Ana River here, Anaheim, Garden Grove, Santa Ana, sandy loam, mostly sand. And as the river slows down, as it reaches the ocean, it drops its clay finally. The clay is real tiny particles. So you get Fountain Valley, Los Alamitos, parts of Costa Mesa, really bad clay. How soil works. Well, so this isn't to scale pretty well, but the tennis balls are supposed to be the sand particles. The ping pong balls are supposed to be the silt, and then the lentil seeds here are supposed to be the clay. In truth, the tennis balls should be actually bowling balls or beach balls because sand is at least 10 times bigger than silt, 10 times the diameter, and clay is like 10 times smaller than ping pong balls and flatter. So I would say confetti would be a better thing in here. But all particles, all soil particles, apparently quartz has a negative charge, and so it's a charged particle. So you can say you have sand and sand and silt. If you look them through microscopes, relatively round. It's interesting. They're relatively round. You look at them and go, that's round. I guess the river does a good job of cutting off all the edges. Silt is pretty much round too, but a lot smaller. And clay are little flat flakes, real tiny flat flakes. You can't see individual particles of clay. They're all negatively charged. Water itself, H2O, oxygen with two hydrogens on one side, it's negative and positive on this side. So water is also a charged particle. So when water encounters any of these, it sticks to it really strongly, really strongly. So if you look at sand that hasn't been baked by the sun in a microscope, you'll see thin layer of water molecules around the edge of it. Same with silt and same with clay. So usually you have one layer that sticks really strongly and then it's still attracted to other water molecules around it. So a lot of water molecules, but the one right on it is really stuck hard. Everything else is stuck a little less hard. But water is attracted to all these particles. That's how soil stores water. Uh, Clay happens to store it better because the smaller the particles in the same volume, the more surface area you have. Mm-hmm. So there might be, 1,000 clay particles in the size of one sand particle. So there's a lot more surface area in this clay. So what we know about soil is that 1 foot high of sand, if it's bone dry, it'll take about ½ inch of moisture entering the top to soak all that 1 foot of sand until it starts dripping out below that. Clay, you might need 2 inches, 2.5 inches of water to do the same thing. So clay holds way more water than sand does. Of course, on the opposite end, the roots can breathe a lot deeper in sand. So even though the sandy soil doesn't hold as much water, the roots might go down 2 or 3 feet in the sand, and the clay they may only go down 8 inches. So you're not really gaining much either way, except initially. Initially, sand is so dry compared to clay that it's easier to start in clay than it is in sand. But once the plant gets going, not a big deal. Once its roots are down there, sand and clay, not much difference in ability for the plants to grow in it. So the airflow through the soil, you can see with the sand. Okay, when you have round spheres, the volume taken up by the round spheres is 2/3 of the volume. The airspace between the round spheres is 1/3. So there's a lot of airspace in sand. Now, the ability to breathe. So the ability to hold water is called the porosity, which everybody gets wrong. They say, well, clay pots breathe, so it's real porous. No, that's not what porous. So porosity is the ability to hold water. Breathability is the permeability. So sand is really permeable because the size of the gaps are real big. Silt less permeable. Clay really bad. Size, lots of airspace in there, but it's really tiny. So the air has a hard time getting through. Now, because we know that 1/3 of the soil is airspace when it's sand and silt, if you have more than 1/3 of your soil being clay, it doesn't breathe. It doesn't take much clay to mess up sandy soil's breathability. It doesn't take much at all. 1/3 your airspace, they're gone. So a lot of the soils around here, it's not 100% clay. It's maybe 40, 50%. But because of that, it doesn't breathe. So now this soil off this farm, it's an extreme sandy loam. I mean, it's really sandy. We analyzed it. So this is how you can roughly analyze soil. You put the soil, fill it halfway up in a jar, water to the neck, a few drops of soap in there, shake it up for several minutes to get all the particles into their smallest pieces. And sometimes you have to do this 2 days in a row to get all the particles away from each other. And then just set it down. And then sand being the biggest particle with the least amount of surface area drops quickly. Silt a little slower. Clay will look like milk in the water or gravy in the water overnight, and it'll settle by the next morning. If you were within a few feet of this, you can see the sand goes up to about there. The clay layer at the very surface is a little over 1/8 of an inch thick. So this is maybe 5 to 8, 10%. No, I don't think it's 10%. Less than 10% clay. Very little clay in here. 80%, maybe 80, even a little higher of the sand. Now, it is true the silt will penetrate through the sand a bit and the clay will penetrate through the silt a bit, so it's not exact, but you can see roughly. I mean, if you've got a clay layer that thick, you know you got breathability problems. So, so this sandy loam happened to be about 85% and about, to say, 8%, and the rest was silt. But it's 93, so that'd be 7% silt. Um, it can range down to 50 as long as this is below 30% clay. It's still called a sandy loam. This would be 50, 25, 25. Rich loam, actually, this is more or less a rich loam when you have that much clay in it. And then a clay type soil, anytime you get above 35% clay, you're into clay soil. Now, clay soil is, if you go back in history on farming, so I have a book somewhere on my shelf. Someone gave me a book that was written in the year 2000, 1900, excuse me, 1900. And they talk about farming in Orange County before 1900. They said farming in Orange County was done in the richer soils in Los Alamitos and Fountain Valley, where they had the clay. That was clay soil is considered the rich soil for a couple reasons. The finer texture it is, the more it holds any minerals that go by, any mineral nutrition. Plus, they stayed wet till summer. In the sandy loam, you couldn't even grow a crop in this. It was so dry with a few weeks after the rains were over, you couldn't grow a crop in it. So they didn't have the irrigation technology back in the 1800s, except for flooding the field. You'd have to flood it every day if it was sandy soil. Whereas with the clay soil, once a month, flood that thing, it stayed wet. So clay soil is considered the rich soil. The sandy soils are considered the poor soils. And now with the gardening we do, anyone who gardens in sand, everything lives. Anyone who gardens clay, everything's dying. And they'll blame you for overwatering. Again, it's not the water. It's just that uh, all plants in the industry right now are being grown in almost pure compost. And that's something the universities pushed on the growers. They keep telling the growers, you cannot grow plants in this. They told me face to face, you can't grow plants in dirt. There's no nutrition in there. You have to grow them in compost. That's their mindset. And it's just crazy that the industry hasn't, the industry's trusting the academia. I do not trust any academia anymore because of this. Because my dad grew plants in this for 30 years before they told him, you can't do that. So compost is just ground up dead trees. It's like the perfect place to grow mushrooms. You want to grow fungus and mushrooms, bacteria. You want to grow earthworms. That's what you use. If you want to grow plants, you need something that acts like this. So 30 years ago, I met up with the soil scientist from NASA, and he said, yeah, your industry's crazy. He says, we're trying to get soil in the space shuttle, and nothing you guys makes is anywhere close to being good. And I listened to him because, we were seeing that. You put plants in a pot with potting soil, they didn't do anything near as well as they did if you put them in the ground. So we started listening to him. They're using forms of, so sand and silt and clay are basically quartz. So they're using a lightweight version of quartz. This guy had found a volcano in New Mexico that had pumice that was really, really light. I mean, he gave me some samples. You put in your hand, you blow on it, just floats. Says that didn't work in the space shuttle. Anything floating in the space capsule is really bad news. So they actually sent up spun glass as their growing medium into the space shuttles in the 80s and 90s. So, so we figured, okay, this pumice, which is nature's lightest version of quartz, is well, okay. So we first did a lot of studies in pure sand. Wanted to check that to see if just pure quartz did the best stuff. And so the first testing we did was strawberry plants. So we had in that time, in the late 80s, early 90s, the top rated potting soil was Whitney Farms. It was called Uncle Malcolm's Blend. So we put in a pot about, 3 gallon container, put a strawberry plant there, and it grew like what we had seen, about this big, leaflets that big, strawberries about that big. Then we did one in sand, the same container. Plant was 2 foot wide, leaflets that big, strawberries, this big. We're going, boy, we're selling poison. This potting soil we're selling is of negative value. What are we doing? So we just quit buying all potting soils at that time, and said we got to figure out how to make our own potting soil. So we knew that this wasn't going to work. You have a bag this size full of this, it's like 45 pounds. You have a bag that size, 1 cubic foot filled with sand, over 100 pounds. It's like, no, not going to work. People aren't going to buy that, even though it works real well. Now, we looked at the history. So, my dad's bonsai book said pure sand is the best growing medium for plants in containers. And apparently in 1920s, they analyzed the big pots in France that they were growing the big citrus trees in, and those original greenhouses in France, 98% sand. So everyone knew sand was the best potting soil for containers, but in our day and age, it's not very convenient. Even though it works really well, it's not very convenient. So we had to figure out a wider way to make sand. Now, before I go that way, let me just mention how plants get their nutrients, so you know how this works. So in nature, most of your older soil textbooks will tell you below the surface of the soil is 99.1% mineral, which is primarily quartz. But above the ground, the average in nature is 5 inches of dead leaves, dead stuff. They call it duff. I'm certain word duff came from dead stuff. Can't figure out how else they would make that word, but 5 inches of dead stuff, dead leaves, animal manures, pieces of dead things on the ground, feathers, fur, all that. This is the nutrition for the plants. It's not down here. It's right there. You have to have that dead stuff on top of the ground. This is where the fungus, the bacteria, earthworms, pill bugs, millipede, that's their home. That's where they operate. It's usually not real fine textured. It's, the thing about how can compost made out of tree wood or bark be natural? How can that be anywhere near natural? I mean, when a tree dies, it may take 200 or more years for that stump to decay, for the tree to decay. You see redwood trees that fell down in the forest 100 years ago. They're still laying there on the ground. At least 3 to 5 years for that stuff to decay before it gets soft enough to work with. But when you take a tree and grind it up, it can decompose in 6 months. The whole thing can decompose real fast, and it makes a lot of heat. It can actually kind of catch on fire. It gets so hot with that hot decomposition. Things in nature don't decompose like that. You get branches and twigs and leaves, coarse stuff on the ground here. The air gets through it, the oxygen gets through it, so the roots don't suffocate. And the earthworms and the pill bugs and all that are doing their thing. The fungus is doing its thing, decomposing the stuff. The nutrients go back to the roots of the plant. It's actually a little more complicated. So we know with trees, so they discovered this in the 60s and 1970s when they invented electron microscopes. They said that they found out, U.S. Forest Department found this out, that what they thought was the tree's roots weren't the tree's roots at all. They found out that 80% of the roots of a tree, what they thought were the roots of the tree, was actually a symbiotic fungus that was attached. And it's the one that goes up in here and does the decomposition. It's called a mycorrhizal fungus. So when plants first came on land from the oceans, they needed this symbiotic partner because they couldn't eat the rocks. Mycorrhizal fungus can actually do a lot of things that plants can. It can decompose rocks. It can decompose um, dead stuff. That's what it likes to do, is decompose dead stuff. So when plants came along on land, they got this mycorrhizal fungus partner that helped them get nutrients from the ground. And so they're attached. They go up into the dead stuff, eat it up, return it to the plant. They said this is much more efficient than a compost pile where you depend on bacteria to eat it, and you have to let the bacteria has to die before the plants get the nutrients back. They said this mycorrhizal fungus can take the minerals out of the dead leaves and put it back up in the same tree the leaf fell off of in less than, well, they said about 3 months. So it's a real fast closed system. This tree wants all the nutrients that drop below it, and it sends it back up. So that's how plants get their mineral nutrition. Of course, we can always supplement them with either chemical fertilizers or organic stuff, but there's a few plants that can mine really poor soil. We call them weeds. So they're highly evolved. Around here, mustard, weeds, and a lot of the different grasses. Their roots are so highly evolved, they act like the mycorrhizas, but they can actually gather the minerals that the real scant minerals of each type of soil will have minerals that certain weeds can handle. And then once the weeds start dying on the surface of the ground, the plants with the mycorrhizal fungus come and take over. The weeds all disappear when you have trees and shrubs around because there's no more free nutrients. It's now a closed system. So in a forest, you don't see many weeds. It's a closed system. So, so that's how nature gets its nourishment. So it's our job to make a soil that wasn't nutritious, but actually works, and it's not too heavy. So um, the lightest form of quartz that nature makes is pumice. Now, I don't have access to that volcano in New Mexico that has real light pumice. So we go with the pumice found in California, which is a bit heavier, but it's still lighter than gravel or solid rock. So it's about 1/3 the weight of a solid rock. The problem with this is that it doesn't quite hold enough water to last the day. The other problem with it is you put a drop of water right on the top of this and it doesn't spread. So I asked the guys at UC Riverside, what's nature's best way to store water for plants? And they told me peat. So peat is a dead plant. But two things about peat that makes it usable for us. It died a long time ago, like 10,000 years ago, 5,000, 10,000 years ago. And they're dead reeds from usually bogs up in Canada. They're not related to anything we have, but they've been underground in the lake, so underwater in the lake so long. There is no disease reaction when you put peat in water. So you can put this in water. The water will not stink in a week. It won't stink in a month. Uh, Decomposes extremely slowly compared to anything else we have. I mean, you put compost in water and it stinks in a few days. It takes so much oxygen out of the water so fast that you start creating an anaerobic reaction, which makes sewer gases, which are black and smelly and poisonous. But peat doesn't do that. Peat wicks water really well. So you mix peat, and so we decided, okay, let's try this. Let's mix two opposites equally and see what we get. Well, we happened to get something that worked really well. So and because it had so much peat, and peat, God does have a acidic quality to it. We call it racemics. Everything grows in it. The problem with peat is not, it's such a small particle that it packs down and it also blows off the surface whenever you water it. So you're losing volume. So we said, well, okay, I want something for saying a permanent potted plant. I want something that's more permanent. So we took some of the peat out and added to it some other lightweight materials. We did add some sand. We'd add perlite, which is man-made pumice, which is even lighter. I mean, there are man-made perlites that are just as heavy as this, but we went with a lighter one to make it lighter. And charcoal. So charcoal is in nature a permanent material. It is organic, but it doesn't break down. There's no fungus or bacteria that can eat charcoal, and it is what makes the rich black souls of the world both rich and black. So charcoal is used in filters because everything sticks to it. Bacteria and fungi like to be around charcoal. And charcoal is permanent. You get charcoal when you have, especially around volcanoes that explode. Um, So a lot of the sides of hills in Italy have a lot of black soil. So when a volcanic plume just comes down the hillside, no oxygen there. It's all carbon dioxide coming out of these volcanoes, and it's really hot. So those trees just incinerate, but without any oxygen. They all turn to charcoal. If there was enough oxygen there, they would turn to ash. But they're just caramelized essentially by this plume of volcanic gases. A hot wildfire will cause charcoal inside the trunk of trees because there's not enough oxygen there to decompose that or to turn it to ash either. So charcoal burning without oxygen, and it makes the soil rich and black forever. And they said the rich black soils of the world only contain half to up to 2% charcoal is about all they can find. But 2% charcoal tends to make everything look black. I mean, if you ever work with toner, which is charcoal, it's really black. It makes everything turn black. Doesn't take much. So apparently charcoal makes it so really rich and black. Doesn't take much. So we put those five things in our top potting soil. Um, Charcoal makes it pricey. In fact, all these materials are pricey except for the sand. And we've had trouble. I mean, our potting soil right now is double the price it was 5 years ago. It's just, plus our potting soil maker is concluded that our potting soil is the best on the market, so they make it the most expensive too. They said this is better than anything else we sell, so we're making it the most expensive. Well, Fox Farm is still more expensive. So, so unfortunately, we have to deal with the premium prices. We don't have the facility to make this. They have these huge machines that they can just dial up, say, okay, we want 30%, 35% this, 30% this, 20% this, 10% this, and 5% that. They just put the numbers in and the machine just mixes it together at that ratio. So we don't have a lot of cheaper companies that make their own potting soil for their nurseries use big tractors, but the blending isn't all that great. Sometimes I've come across plants and pots that this side was all bark and this side was all dirt. It's like, yeah, it wasn't blended really well. So now our facility unfortunately does a lot of potting soils with wood in them because most potting soils are made out of wood. So at the front end of the run, they do about 1,000 bags at a time. Unfortunately, we'll get pieces of wood in there now and then. And there are, in nature, pieces of wood stuck in peat bogs too. So can't keep it perfect, but we haven't had any problems. Last year at this time, we were finding a lot of wood in our top pot. We still used it and had good results. Didn't see any suffering from that. The wood is a big piece, and it's not been chopped up into a million little pieces. It doesn't decompose that badly. Now, what's interesting is that um, our nursery industry, for some reason, has their head in the sand. They haven't learned this stuff. Agriculture, they know what they're doing. So, hothouse farmers deal with pots and greenhouses. So most of your tomatoes, marijuana, they're grown in pots in greenhouses. And greenhouses are real expensive to operate, so they have to use really good soil. And there's no greenhouse that uses compost. They know it doesn't work. So we saw an article, this was 30 years ago, from Holland. Holland, all greenhouses. They grow, half the produce for all of Europe and surrounding countries and flowers and things like that. So their study showed that of the organic materials, the ones that do work because they know how long they work for, these four things can be used as a potting medium. Rice hull is essentially the hull of the rice, 90% silica. Essentially doesn't decompose. Charcoal doesn't decompose, but it's real expensive. This is expensive. No one uses that really. Uh, Coco coir can work because coconuts decompose rather slowly, can work up to 6 or 8 months. And peat about the same length of time. If you have a short crop, they'll hold their form so that the air can get through, so they're permeable for that length of time. But eventually, the permeability of these two disappears, and so, but they know how long it lasts. So for a lot of crops, they said, okay, you can use this for a 3 month crop. This is good for a 3 month crop, no problems. They told us so. Because Europe invented the method of pallets and forklifts, they have a lot of wood there, so they spent years trying to figure out how to make wood and growing medium. Since they have a lot of old pallets they got to destroy, they said, well, let's put them to use when we make a growing medium. And they said it wouldn't work. They said they tried wood and bark for 10 years. They said the problem with the piece of wood, any piece of wood, is that parts of this wood is not a uniform material. And parts of it decompose really quick and parts really slow, so they can never predict how long ground up wood will last as a growing medium, so they gave up. Yet in the US, virtually every grower uses wood or bark as their growing medium in containers. In Europe, they said, no go. They can't tell a farmer how long this will work and how good it'll work. So in Europe, they also use a lot of inorganic materials. So they do use sand, pumice, vermiculite, not much. Vermiculite is popped clay, and it tends to get real slimy really quick. Can't breathe. Perlite, and an interesting one, the most expensive soil in the world, clay pellets. So it's clay that breathes. There's different size pellets you get. Some clay pellets are the size of sand grains, and some clay pellets are like this. So lots of airspace in there. The most expensive crops, this can probably give you the fastest growth of any material in hydroponics. So hydroponics, they maximize, if you maximize the water to the roots and you maximize the air to the roots, when you do that, you get the fastest growth. And what we noticed is over the years, if you can get more air to the roots, the plant leaves get bigger. Big leaves, healthy roots, fast growth, healthy roots, better colored foliage, healthy roots. Get the brown around the edges of your leaves, bad roots, no roots. We can't believe, we've taken some plants apart that had brown edge leaves. We'll find maybe 2 or 3 living roots in that entire container. That plant was surviving on 2 or 3 roots. We can't, especially plumerias. We get them from some plumeria growers. There's one root on that stick that they put in there. It's got leaves and flowers. It's got one root. Things in solid ground up cedar, like how can that thing grow in there? But being a succulent, fortunately, it doesn't need much soil. It doesn't need much root, put it that way. But this, you can get the fastest growth, most vigorous growth. You got to water it frequently, like every 20 minutes or every couple hours at least. So this is what they grow all the marijuana in. So your most expensive crop, you're better off if you use the best soil possible, and that's clay pellets. Now, for 10 years, the local marijuana growers handbook had our acid mix in it. They said this works really well. So we used to have people come in. It's like Cadillac pulls up 20 bags of your acid mix, please. So, so for a while, it had that reputation. So it does grow really well. I mean, when we made our top, I didn't name that. My wife named it, and our distributor, this was like 10 years ago, said that's a bad name for potting soil. And then when marijuana got legalized, oh, that's a great name. So anyway, um, that weighs about 35 pounds. Again, if it was sand in there, it would weigh over about 100 pounds. 35, and if it's raining, this year was nice and wet, so these have a bit of moisture. They might have about 5 pounds more of water in there. So it is kind of heavy. But anything will grow in this. Anything will grow in this. We can grow anything here. I mean, you see the big leaves in our gardenia.
Aww.
Happy plant. So gardenia was our test plant. When we made our top hall, we go, okay, we're gonna grow a gardenia there and see how happy it is. And after 2 years, we had this plant that was this tall, in a real small pot even. We're going, okay, this plant's real happy. We're good with the soil. So all these plants are in our top pot. And then we grow more things every year because, when we get stuff from our growers now, okay, we can do better than that. I mean, we only have a half acre here. That's the problem. And we need like 3 or 4 acres. There's an acre next to us that we're hoping to get a hold of. There's actually 2 acres there. We're hoping to get one of them because the owner of that land wants a lot of money. He wanted like 15 grand a month. But he's got in and out on part of it in Chick-fil-A, so hopefully you'll be happy if we just fill up the property with something. And we'll see what we can do. So when they started fooling with our soils, of course, they know that organic matter has the minerals in it, and so for 100 years, farms have been turning organic matter into soil to make their ground more nutritious. But we found out, well, the reason they turned it in is because if they don't turn the compost they spread on top of the farm in, it just blows away, blows to the next farm. So they have to turn it into the soil, dice it into soil to keep it intact. But they know there's a limit. They know that it's about 5 cubic yards per acre. If they go too much, if you spread 5 yards over an acre, it's like this thick. They're adding nutrition, but it's very little amount. And we've seen this farm turn that in, and this is what their soil looks like. You can't see it. It's a very small amount. Now, the University of California, Davis did go around the farms in California year 2000. They wanted to make sure that the farmers weren't mistreating their soil because in nature, it's a little less than 1%. And they went around the farms in California. They said, perfect. The average farm in California is at 1.1% organic matter by content, by volume. But, you get these bags of planter mix and they'll tell you, mix it 50-50 with your soil. Now, the university did mention that there are some reclaimed marshlands near Sacramento, 40% organic because it's marshland. It said those farmers there can only grow seasonal crops, nothing permanent, and they have to manage their water very carefully because everything wants to rot in it. So anytime you have that much organic matter ground, even if it's real old dead stuff, you can have trouble. And here, now I learned a lot back in the early 90s because I bought a house and I thought the local soil companies knew more than I did about dirt because I didn't know anything in 1990. It took me until about 93, 94 to figure this out. And so we called up this local company, said, "Oh, we needed 17 cubic yards to fill all the raised beds in our backyard. 170 cubic yards, excuse me, 17 truckloads." So they said, "Use our topsoil seed. 45, that's 40% organic." So we loaded. So okay, I thought they knew what they were doing because they said they supplied stuff to Disneyland. So I filled it all up and planted my plants. And half a year later, half the stuff was rotting and falling over. Going, okay, my last house, everything grew just fine. What's going on? What am I doing wrong? And then we met up with the soil scientists right about that same time. And so what happened is, it took me 10 years to get this stuff out of my brain. Our trash bins only hold a half yard at a time. So half yard a week, I can take it out of my beds and throw it in the trash bin. And as we're throwing it away, we noticed that the amount of tree roots going through this stuff was about one root every 6 inches. So I was finding about one root every 6 inches. And more roots across the top, and a whole bunch of roots underneath the stuff I had brought in the native clay. Like they like the clay soil better than the stuff I had brought, even though it looked really nice. It was sandy looking and brown. That was the key problem. It was brown and it smelled. It had an odor to it. Not putrid, had more of an acrid odor. And acrid means not quite enough oxygen to do best decomposition. So I moved it and seeing about one root every 6 inches, replaced it with this. And a few months later, I checked the soil again, one root every quarter inch. So this holds way more roots than anything with compost in it. And I finished doing that 10 years after that, and still there's not much growing in it. So even the weeds didn't like it that much. So we know that that was death to my yard, is putting that stuff in there. And to this day, that company doesn't know any better. So one time they said, well, we're going to test because I had to make in volume our top pot. They said, we want to see what's up with your soil. We're going to grow a tomato plant in there to see how good it is. So that's how they test your soil. Tomatoes, one of the few plants that'll grow in a compost spot. They grow in a bag of manure. So the tomato roots are really tolerant to bad conditions. And that's how they test how good their soil is. So their tomatoes grow on their topsoil. So we tell our customers, you're fixing your yard, do not buy anything called topsoil. The people who make it don't know anything about growing plants. They always mix good soil with some form of either manure or compost or both. So real hesitant. I mean, true topsoil doesn't have any compost in it, but no one sells true topsoil. Now we found out that the soil they sell at Disneyland is this.
Oh,
They call it Special D because that's sand. Because Disneyland is on top of Santa Ana Riverbed. It's just sand, very sandy soil. So everything grows well there.
um,
But we did see one bed that was filled with that topsoil. See at Disneyland, and all the plants had brown tip leaves. So, any questions today? So, okay, so if you get a plant that's growing in compost, we found over time, now I used to have a class on this, then we won't for another month or so. You can take off half the soil on any plant, you won't kill it. Pretty much half the soil. We usually take off all of it if we're going to put it in our soil. But some plants are really sensitive, like totally bad with gardenias, taking off soil off gardenias that are in the wrong stuff. Losses are over 50%. Avocados have been closer to 60% loss when we try to change the soil on avocados. So it's hard to fix avocados, it's hard to fix gardenias. But we never lost a single citrus tree we did that on. Just knocked all the soil. My son came up with the method, and I was gonna yell at him because he was just dropping take him out of the 5-gallon buckets, dropping them on the pavement. rotating, dropping, rotating around. After 30 seconds, you just take the trunk, vibrate it, all the dirt would fall off, put it back in the pot with our top pot. We put it in half a day of shade for about 2 weeks because there is some shock involved, especially if it's above 80 degrees, where they need all their roots and they don't have it, they'll drop their leaves. But we never lost a single leaf or a single tree with that method. So there's some plants that have really strong roots, although we've taken some avocados apart and the roots just are disintegrating because they're all rotten already. So, and a lot of plants you buy from nurseries, you pull them out of the pot, all the roots in the bottom are brown. They're already rotten. So be aware of that. Daylilies can live in sewage, so they're pretty good. Most daisies are good. Except for the Gerber daisies are real sensitive. Alstomerias are real sensitive. However, Alstomerias have that trick where the rhizomes grow sideways out of the soil into your native soil, and then they're fine. So this center part may die out, but they'll make it because they'll just grow into real dirt. So some plants are like that. Some plants can move. Blackberries, raspberries, boydenberries all move out of that bad soil that the growers use. Um, yes.
Now, if I have clay soils at home, how much of my soil should I change? I mean, how deep and wide?
Well, again, you don't have, okay, so the problem is if you put compost in the clay, it becomes deadly. If there's no compost in clay, it's not a problem at all. Again, my parents, when they moved to Michigan in the 60s, total clay. Planted everything, azaleas, camellias, ferns, nothing died. Nothing died. Clay is not the problem. It's the compost and the clay mix that is the big problem. So you don't have to fix your clay, but to make clay breathe, you just have to add more sand to it.
If I already have compost in there, then should I just take out all that soil?
Yeah, you can't fix it. It can take decades for that thing to repair itself. It's especially if it's dark and especially if it smells at all. Just get it out.
I just took down my olive tree this time, and I sprayed it on the surface and on our planters, on our flowers, and left a pile up in the backyard. So you decided what to do. What do you think?
Yeah, that's fine. So yeah, if you grind up any tree and use it as a surface mulch, that's fine. I mean, it decomposes faster than it's supposed to, but that's still okay. As long as it's on top of the ground, you don't make it too deep so the air can get, as long as you think the air can get through it. Like I had two trees stump ground in my yard, and right where they stump ground it, it's all this ground up roots mixed with the dirt. I just cleaned it all out, just got rid of it all, put it in the dump, put it in the trash, brought in, I brought in decomposed granite. I like this stuff because it doesn't stick to your shoes too badly at all. So it's even cleaner than sandy loam. But it's hard to find sandy loam so you go to a place like around here, there's the Blue Ribbon, there's Thompson's Building Supplies, Aguanaga Fertilizer, Larry's Building Materials. They all have piles of dirt piles. Now, just be careful. They'll probably recommend for your purpose their topsoil, which is not what you want. You want to get this is sometimes called fill dirt because if you've got a construction going on and you need to fill a hole, you don't want to use clay. It's because it expands and contracts with water. You want something that's mostly sand. So their fill dirt is often their sandy loam. But I do like DG a lot, decomposed granite. Plants grow well on that. There's a lot of farms in Vista and Fallbrook, Temecula that are in pure decomposed granite. Plants do real well on it.
So our gardener has not taken out the roots yet. They're waiting to go down and make the hole when I'm ready to plant the new tree. So when they clean out the roots, what should go into a hole with the new tree?
Well, if you get a tree from us that we grew, nothing has to go in. You just put it in the ground. It's fine.
There'll be a huge hole, bigger.
Well, you can surround it with either this sand or top pot, which is way more expensive than sand, but a lot lighter to hold. So, if the potting soil like ours are made well, they can be used as soil substitutes. Whereas most potting soils, you put them in the ground, everything dies in it because it's like being in a big clay pot with compost. But our soil works as well in the ground as it does in a pot. But again, sand is cheaper. Decomposed granite. If you know anyone with a pickup truck, a gardener, you can go down to a building supply, get a whole scoop, from a building supply. It's supposed to be half a yard. However, they don't level off that front loader that they use, so it usually ends up being about, instead of half yard, which is 13 and a half cubic feet, it ends up being more like 16 or 18 cubic foot of soil. And like when I bought decomposed granite last year, it was $50, no, 40 something, no, 54 with tax, 59 total for my filling up the back of my pickup with this.
You get that at Home Depot?
No, at a building supplier.
Building supplier. Building supplier has decomposed granite
They have,
and sand and sandy loam.
right, and all three of those work well. Sand works, sandy loam works, decomposed granite works. When I had a big crater in my back because we removed two big trees this last year, and I didn't have access to my pickup at the time, so I went down to Home Depot and bought 30 bags of sand to fill that hole. And a little bit of our top pot because I didn't buy quite enough sand. It was a big crater. Put my avocado tree in that, doing really well. So something that's not organic. If you do that, you're fine. Again, you could use these three organic materials. Seem to be okay. Coconut coir, I'm not a fan of at all. It seems to make anything grown in it orange tinged.
Yeah.
Because there's an avocado grower down in Vista, Fallbrook, that uses that to grow their avocado trees, and we put them next to ours. They look orange. It's really odd, the color in that. So there's something in here either lacking or too much of that's making the plants turn a funny color. So I don't trust coconut coir. Plus, it does break down within 2 years. Now, there are some good potting soils out there. I'll just mention them. If you're not around, if you don't live around here, Sungrow, the Sunshine Peat Moss Company, has different variations of their potting soil. Their Pro Mix is their best one. It's 80% peat, 20% perlite. It's not quite enough perm material to make that thing good for more than a year and a half. But for a year and a half, you get some good growth in it. But after that, it gets real sludgy because the amount of perlite is just not enough to keep it breathing. I mean, their sales rep swore to me that their Sungrow product would beat ours. So we did a test. But I told them it's got to be a 2-year test. So after we were growing Haboti kava trees, which are really sensitive to bad soil, first year both of them looked the same, identical. They had grown about from here to about here in a 5-gallon bucket. I said, okay, come back next year. And he came back next year, and mine was like this. His was still like this. So we know that it works really well for a short time. Fox Farm has a lot of similar products that are mostly peat, a little bit of perlite, not quite enough to keep it going forever. Now, the reason nurseries use pretty much ground up bark for the soil, so the major nurseries do this. So they found out, so the university, they asked universities, what's the best lightweight material to grow a plant of pot in? It turns out it's this. So the reason it's like that, let's take time scale and let's put down permeability and porosity. So when this stuff is really fresh, the permeability is really high. Not very porous though. So when nurseries first put that in a container, and they usually grind up a little finer than that, the porosity is about here, the permeability is about here, but the plants are so small, they don't need much moisture retention. So this can work. As this stuff stays moist, porosity does this. Permeability does this.
Oh. Opposite.
So this works better than this does for about, they say about 5 months. This is superior to this because it's supplying what that growing plant needs. A lot of air, a little bit of moisture, and as the plant gets bigger, they go like this. By about 5 months, they're here. That's when you usually get the plants. And then beyond this, toxic medium.
Uh-huh.
That's what the research shows. That's a toxic medium. We were told, and one time I asked one grower, "Now I bought this box tree from you a year ago. It died." He said, "You didn't sell it fast enough."
What?
Because they know that there's like 8 months is the limit for plants in this medium.
Yeah.
And the research article that I read might have been University of Michigan, might have been University of, I don't know, back east somewhere. As a nurseryman, you have choices. You have to either make sure that you put your plant in a pot of fresh bark, or throw it away, or have it sold by before 8 months. Now, most of the United States is not like California. So, in fact, there's hardly any states like California where we keep a plant in the same pot outdoors year round. If you're anywhere east of California, north of Florida, everything freezes by November. So nurseries, say Missouri, they buy their potted plants, from California a lot, Oregon, in April, and they have a fire sale in September. They don't want it on their property after September, so they only have it for 4 months. They never see these things die. They're out of there. We see it. And because we're a grower, retailer, we know what to do. The problem we have now is that the growers are not the retailers. So the growers get rid of all their plants before 5 months. And they never get any feedback from the nurseries because we were told we're overwatering the plants. That's why they're dying. But they're dying because they're in the wrong mix. They're not in anything that resembles soil. We figured this out because we grow stuff, but I don't know. This industry is all disjointed now, so that the people who need to know don't get any feedback. I mean, I just had another nursery go out of business. They declared they're going out of business, and they're one that just switched to it's like 4 years ago, they switched to this kind of soil. And they're going out of business, and they don't know why. Their sales rep quit 2 years ago because he knows me and he knows my thoughts about soil. He went to work for someone else. He says, "This is not working." But the head of I talked to the head of the owner of the nursery, the president of the nursery, and she goes, "I refer you to my grower. I don't know anything else about dirt." And it's their grower that's the problem because they learned from the universities how to grow plants. So that's the state of our industry. Everybody's growing plants the wrong way. Back east, they all asked California, "How do you grow plants in pots?" We told them, bark. So we're having trouble. There's a few nurseries sticking around that grow their plants in the ground, dig them up, wrap in burlap and sell them. They know it works. We know it works. No problem with that. It's just the container growers, they're just clueless. Hopefully, we can fix the industry. I mean, that's why I'm in business. I mean, 20 years ago, we're at a crossroads where I can say, okay, I can sell the business, work for someone else. We said, we can't work for somebody else. We can't sell plants that are in this stuff unless it's one of those plants. But if we want to grow any of these, we got to grow it ourselves.
What about the house plants?
Same problem. So, well, fortunately, the growers over the years have figured out some stuff. So for a while, they were using wood shavings and bark. At least they found out that that wasn't any good. So now they're back to pure peat, which at least doesn't give them a disease reaction. So the plants look pretty good when we get them. But, a year from now, they're going to start suffering because peat moss is going to slowly break down. So we have to change them to our soil. But, yeah, we've noticed that over the last 2 years, they went from ground up bark and wood shavings to almost pure peat, all of them. So at least that's one step in the right direction. Now I have one grower who's always done it right. I'll mention their name because they've always done it right. Rancho Soledad, down in San Diego County. They have their facility growing propagation facilities in Hawaii, and they actually ship the lightweight black volcanic rock to California from Hawaii and put their plants in it. I have a few of their things here we get from a jobber, or we get, well, they sell their plants to other wholesale growers, and we get some of them, and they're in black volcanic rock with what looks like to be some peat in there. Can't tell what it is. It's some gooey black stuff mixed with the volcanic rock. But we never have problem with their plants. The only grower I know of now, we know there's a few growers, I think, that sell to some chain stores that use no wood or bark. They use peat and perlite. I think that's what's the name of that company? Kent's? Not Kent. It's got some guy's name down in Fallbrook, and they sell to a lot of grocery stores. I think Trader Joe's buys from them, maybe Albertsons buys from them, and at least they don't use ground up wood or bark. Yes.
What's the difference between these two? The acid mix and the top lot.
So the acid mix can shrink a bit because it's 50% peat. So the peat is making up some of the volume, and as a peat, it's such a tiny part, it's such a skinny particle that over time it compacts and it kind of blows off when you water it with the hose. A lot of the peat blows in the air, and it decomposes at a real slow rate. So we're losing about 15 to 20% volume over a year in the acid mix. We still use it a lot for things like vegetables, flowers, things that are just seasonal, and things that need a lot of acidity, like blueberries, and a lot of water, like blueberries, azaleas, things like that, ferns. So we still use that for that, and we use it for propagation because all the material in here is considered sterile.
Mm.
So we can start seeds and cuttings in that without much problems.
But generally, you recommend the top.
Top pot for anything more permanent. We found that we take the peat moss volume down to 35%. We think what it's doing is that the peat moss at that point is just sitting between the bigger particles. It's not contributing to the volume of the soil at all. So even though the peat moss is slowly decomposing and going away, the soil level doesn't seem to change because the peat's not contributing to the volume much at all. I mean, there's a little bit, but not much at all because we don't see our soil shifting. I mean, this has only been in here for maybe 6 months. So this will be like to see. Nice roots, all light colored, firm. I mean, from my other growers, they have to stake up a lot of their plants because all their plants are doing this because the soil's breaking down. It's not stable, so the plants are all gone.
Thank you.
I mean, when we grow trees, generally we don't stake them. They don't need to be staked. They're so firm that stuff doesn't move at all.
Okay, you gotta move 1%.
Okay.